I want you to imagine yourself as a black American woman living in Virginia in America in 1951. You work as a tobacco farmer and you have a husband and 5 children. In early 1951, you begin experiencing abdominal pain, and so you go to the only hospital in the area that is willing to treat black patients. Here, you are diagnosed with cervical cancer and you're put on radiotherapy for the next few months. Little did you know that upon your very first visit to the hospital, your cells have been taken and will later be distributed across the world for the next half a century. Even after your death, your genome will be made public and sequenced, and pharmaceutical companies will be profiting off the use of your cells all the while your family remains in poverty. This is the story of Henrietta Lacks, arguably the most important person to have existed for biomedical research. So, how is Henrietta Lacks important for biomedical research? Well, firstly, Henrietta Lacks produced the first immortal human cell line, and her cells have between 76 and 80 chromosomes compared to the normal 46. It was the structure of these chromosomes that gave them their immortal nature. Now, all human cells have repeating DNA sequences at the end of their chromosomes called telomeres, as you can see on the diagram. These telomeres are able to act as a buffer in DNA replication, because in DNA replication and cell division, after each replication, parts of your DNA are lost at the ends, and so these telomeres act as a buffer to prevent the loss of important protein-coding DNA further along the genome. There comes to a point after several DNA replication and cell divisions where your telomeres become too short, and at this point your cells are instructed to stop dividing to protect the rest of your genome. However, Henrietta Lacks' cells, abbreviated to HeLa cells, are able to continually resynthesize these telomeres through the use of telomerase enzymes, and this has allowed the cells to live on to this very day and be used across various departments across science. So, is the Lacks family just deserving of compensation? Is it justifiable? Well, the main argument for this compensation is down to the number of contributions that she has been able to offer across biomedical research. Her cells have been used in the development of the polio vaccine, which helped to eradicate poliovirus across various nations worldwide after a series of fatal epidemics across the 18th and 19th centuries. Her cells have also been used in cancer research and the development of IVF, and her cells were also the very first human cells to be sent to space to investigate the effects of space exploration on human cells. There's no doubt about how her significant scientific contributions justify compensation. But there's another aspect of this debate: the lack of consent. When her cells were first taken, she had no idea that they were taken, and even 20 years after they have been used across various departments and have been spread around the world, her family still had no idea. Her cells have ended up across almost every biology lab in the world and contributed, and she's often deemed as the individual to have contributed most to science. We live in a day and age today where patient autonomy and confidentiality is at the heart of medical ethics. So surely this demands compensation purely because of the immorality of the treatment of Henrietta Lacks and her family, especially considering her family's financial troubles and lack of privacy since the release of her genome. Some would also argue that had Henrietta Lacks been a white woman, her family would already be being compensated for her contributions. However, there is the other side to the debate. Pharmaceutical companies argue that patients have no rights to their tissues after they've been removed from the body, and they would argue that all medical treatments should be trialled regardless of the opinions of the donor. After all, if every single person sued for the commercialization of their cells, the rate of development of science would be dramatically slowed, devaluing the importance of developing the public health sector. There's also some historical context to take into account. It was common medical and legal practice to take cells from patients at the time without offering explicit informed consent or offering any financial compensation. And it's often deemed as unfair across the scientific community to impose modern ethical standards and laws to previous events. There are also issues with have compensation being justifiable. Who should be providing this compensation? Are the governments responsible using taxpayers' money? Should it be the individual or institution that first took her cells? This is part of the debate. Some agreements have been made between the Lacks family and various institutions. Since her genome was made public, the National Institute of Health stepped in 3 years later and got the genome taken down. Since then, they have made a board of scientists alongside 2 members of the Lacks family who now seek to approve any federally funded studies involving the use of her cells. However, this doesn't really apply to any private institutions or in many international groups. So anyone who wants to sequence her genome, if they have the cells already, they're free to do so. The National Institute of Health, because they can't control what's going on in international groups and the private sector, they do urge all those in the scientific community to seek approval from the board regardless of what they're being used for. And they hope that all those who use their cells show acknowledgements in their scientific papers and their findings. There's also been a private lawsuit between a biotech company and the Lacks family, though the details of this have not been disclosed to the public. So, in conclusion, Henrietta Lacks and the story of the Lacks family has helped shape the collection, storage, and research use of biospecimens across the globe. She's also been pivotal in creating regulations across nations surrounding informed consent, commercialization of biospecimens, and also around data sharing and the right to withdraw your data. So, do you think Henrietta Lacks should be offered compensation? If so, how much financial compensation would you deem as appropriate? And who do you think is responsible for offering this compensation? Should it be institutions that took her cells? Should it be the taxpayers' money from governments? Or should it be anyone who uses her cells? Thank you for listening.